Welcome to the Garland County Historical Society's May meeting. We're going to have a Pledge of Allegiance now, led by Charlie Plymouth.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charlie. You've each received the minutes from our last meeting. We'd like to approve the minutes.
Move for approval as submitted.
Thank you. We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you so much.
What's that, Tom?
Tom and Kyle. Now we're going to have Julie Nix going to come up here and say something.
Well, actually, I'm not going to come up there because neither my sight nor my hearing is good enough, but I think my voice will carry. I just wanted to point out and say thank you. As you know, we're the Garland County Historical Society, but we have really no connection to the county other than we live here. So all of our funding comes from grants, your personal memberships, and about 3 years ago, we started a corporate membership program. So I would urge you, as you're out and about, please say thank you. National Park Gifts and Souvenirs, Arvis, Myers Realty, AT&T, Wapaw Badge and Paws, Selected Funeral and Life Insurance Company, and believe it or not, Tiny Town, who is our newest corporate member. Please show your appreciation to these businesses. Thank you so much. And if you would like to add your name, we'll be happy to do that.
Thank you, Julie. And now Butch from the library wants to come up here.
Hey, everybody. So you guys may know me. My name is Butch. I'm the Design and Facilities Manager. I head up the major projects around here. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to remind you guys and anybody else who hasn't seen it, GCLPLUS.com, GCLplus.com. That is our expansion and renovation project. You can go on there. You can see all the stuff we've got planned. We're going to be adding more renders as we get it. We need help. This is a non-taxpayer funded project. Not a single penny of this is coming from tax money. This is 17 years of the library scrimping and saving for this movement. Inflation ate our lunch. We had enough. We've got enough to do the construction. We just don't have enough to fill it full of anything interesting. So go on there. We're talking about new teaching kitchen, STEM lab for kids, expanded children's area, more display space, more stack space, teen area, 2 recording areas. We really want to do like a heritage recording session where it's basically hot spring stories and we're going to archive them on the website. We're looking to do the same thing with Arkansas local music. A maker space where we can get a lot of artists and stuff in here and getting people kind of get that community entrepreneurship going. We're trying to find a location right now to move into because it'll knock 6 months at about $500,000 off the bill. Like I said, we have the money for construction. We just don't have it enough anymore now that inflation's kind of gotten to us. There's a donate link on there, large or small, even like a $5 donation. We've got it set up to where it'll just take $5 every month. There's 100,000 people in our service area. If 500 people gave $5 a month, for that first year, we would completely pay for the summer reading program. And little bits make a big difference. But please go onto the website, see all the really cool stuff we're getting kind of put together. I'm about to hopefully go on a tour of another location we can actually move into here today. We just really need help. We're bootstrapping this as hard as we can, and we really want to show you guys what we can do with what we have. And then if you guys like it, then in the years coming, we'll start looking at other branches and stuff like that. So appreciate it. Check out the website. There's a banner outside and some buttons and some flyers. There's even some 3D renders over in the circulation area. We can actually see what they're going to look like. We made those in-house. Very proud of those. You can see the little tiny tables and chairs. All right. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Butch. And now our Executive Director, Liz Robbins.
Thank y'all for being here today. I want to briefly invite you to our programs after our summer hiatus. There'll be no program in June, July, or August, but they start up again the third Tuesday in September when Brian Irby from the Arkansas State Archives is going to give a program about the most amazing hot spring sporting event that you've never heard of. It's an incredibly entertaining program, so be here for that. And then in October, on the third Tuesday, we've got a very special event. We're working with the Documentary Film Festival and with the library and presenting our program not here, but at the Arlington Hotel to mark the 100th anniversary of the building of the third Arlington. We have a wonderful speaker. Hollis, stand up. Hollis Duncan. There is nothing about the Arlington Hotel or radio station KTHS that Hollis doesn't know. I'm not exaggerating a bit. And he will be our speaker, speaking to us at the Arlington about this wonderful 100th anniversary. So please be with us in October for that. Now today, we are absolutely delighted to welcome someone I know you're very familiar with. Rex Nelson is one of the most high-profile writers and speakers in the state. We could take a survey. Everybody who loves to read Rex Nelson or listen to him, raise your hand. And there's a sea of hands out there. I know you know he's the senior editor of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette and writes 3 columns a week, and also the essays for the cover of the Sunday's Perspective section. As someone with a little bit of experience with writing, I don't know how that man does it. That's amazing. He's also the author of 3 books, one about Hillary Rodham Clinton, a biography of educator Ben Elrod, and a collection of his essays about Arkansas. And if you haven't read his blog, Rex Nelson's Southern Fried, you are missing a treat. You need to read his blog and listen to his Southern Fried podcast. They are wonderful. Now, you may not have known he served for almost a decade as the Policy and Communications Director for Governor Mike Huckabee, and then served for 4 years in the administration of President George W. Bush as one of the president's 2 appointees to the Delta Regional Authority. And in 2016, Governor Hutchinson and the Arkansas Rural Development Commission named him as its Rural Advocate of the Year for the state of Arkansas. And if there is anybody who's an advocate for Arkansas, of course, it's Rex Nelson. And of course, he is in the Arkansas Sportscasters and Sports Writers Hall of Fame. And today, we're just tickled to death that he's here with us. He's truly an Arkansas treasure. Please welcome Rex Nelson.
Thank you so much for having me today. Any day that I'm in Hot Springs is a good day for me. So it is just wonderful to be here. So many friends in the room. Thank you for coming out on a weekday during lunch when you could be doing many other things. I'm very honored that you would do that. Those of you, and I've given, countless Rotary speeches, other groups around town through the years have heard me say this before, but I will start by saying it again because it's the honest truth. And that was, as I was a boy growing up down the road in Arkadelphia, Hot Springs was my New York City. I grew up in a college town, so I was blessed at that. But in Arkadelphia, and I only say this about half kiddingly, because we did have a few Methodist and Presbyterians scattered in, but you were either a white Baptist or a black Baptist there, and there wasn't much difference. I would come to Hot Springs, and it was like I had gone to a foreign country. My sister had her motors pulled at the hospital, I remember, and as a young boy, I just stared at the nuns and their habits, because we didn't have nuns and habits in Arkadelphia. I found out that Hot Springs had Jews even, that there were Greeks that lived in Hot Springs who were Orthodox. This was a worldly place, unlike the vast majority of towns in Arkansas, and I loved it so much. I was kind of at the end of an era. I was born in 1959, as you know, the leading year for the number of baths in hot springs was 1945. So bathing in America had already been in a decline for a good 15 years by the time I was even born. Downtown held on, of course, with illegal gambling that continued to draw people and make up for the number of bathers falling off. But again, I was kind of at the end of that era, because when Winthrop Rockefeller was elected governor in 1966, I had just turned 7 years old. So most of my memories were after that period, as Rockefeller and his administration got very serious at that point about shutting down illegal gambling. So for most of my formative years, great memories, but it was also a period in which Hot Springs was very much in decline downtown. By the time I was in college at Ouachita and we were making our road trips to Hot Springs, obviously there were only one bathhouse, the Buckstaff, still open by that point. On the other side of Central Avenue, the wooden canopy that had been built was pretty much rotted by then and would tend to drop strange liquids on your head as you walked under it. On the other side of Central Avenue, about half the storefronts were empty by that point, and I think most of us would agree that Hot Springs downtown was a pretty sad place. There had continued to be growth in Hot Springs, but again, it had all been south down Highway 7 toward the lake. And you look at the mall, you look at then all of the chain restaurants that sprang up. You look at everything that happened between here and Lake Hamilton to the south. But the problem with the exception of Oakland Park, much of that strip could have been anywhere in USA, right? It was not unique. It was the same chain restaurants, the same chain stores, the same gas station brands that you see in cities all over America. The thing that made Hot Springs, the thing that once made Hot Springs one of America's greatest resorts, and that is the downtown area around the springs, was in a state of decline. Now things began to pick up as the arts came into Hot Springs, but it was still pretty slow overall. And 10 years ago, after I had started the blog, I had started the blog that Liz mentioned in 2009. 10 years ago, I had been doing some blog posts on the state of things downtown and how we had too many of the big buildings that were still empty in all Arkansans, because this was one of our national treasures. So not just Garland County residents, but all Arkansans should get focused on revitalizing the downtown area. And I got an email one day after writing some of those, and it was from Mark Gregory at the Sentinel Record, and he said, I've been reading what you've been writing about downtown, and I wanted you to know that they had just started putting up plywood to cover the doors and windows of the old Majestic Hotel. And I thought that's kind of the last straw. I mean, here we are, one of the premier locations in the state, the northern end of Central Avenue, that great street. The building, of course, had been empty for years by this point, but now that the plywood was actually covering things, what kind of message were we sending to out-of-state visitors? So I wrote a column that was headlined, or a blog post that was headlined, "The Shame of Hot Springs." And to this day, it is still the most read single post since I started that blog, and it's been 15 years now. And that was the most read. I put it up late on a Friday afternoon. On Saturday, I started getting emails, so I knew people were sharing it. And by Sunday, I was looking at the numbers on my phone, and they just exploded. And it told me people care about Hot Springs. They care about downtown, or else they wouldn't be sharing this and wouldn't be so widely calling me sending it to others out of state. It shows they care about hot springs like I care. The following week, I was attending a lecture at the Clinton Presidential Library. Luckily, I had my phone on silent, but I could feel the buzz, and my phone just starts to blow up in the middle of that lecture. So, fearing that there was some kind of family emergency with it buzzing over and over, I did pull it out during the lecture, opened it up, and I'm getting texts and emails from dozens of people saying the Majestic is on fire. What timing? That column had posted the previous Friday. The very next week, the Majestic burns. And with the burning of the Majestic, I think a lot of people, both here and statewide, suddenly had a realization a lot like I think the people of New Orleans had in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. You'll remember that awful flood, one of the worst disasters in American history after Katrina in New Orleans. And I felt that as we watched television, we were watching the death of a great American city in real time, which was nothing like we had ever experienced. Now, New Orleans population is not back to where it was before Katrina, but believe it or not, there are now more quality hotel rooms and more restaurants in New Orleans than there were before the storm. And I think what people there realized is what makes us unique nationally is very fragile, and we can no longer take it for granted. And I think in the wake of the fire, we said to ourselves, again, not just those of you who live in Garland County, but as Arkansans, what makes Hot Springs unique? What made it for so many years one of America's great resorts is somewhat fragile, and we need to protect it and not lose the golden egg. So I'm going to do something that I rarely do, and that is I'm going to read to you. I usually just talk extemporaneously, but in the introduction, it was mentioned that I do, in addition to 3 columns a week, I do a longer cover story for the front of what we call the perspective section on Sunday, which is our op-ed section. Now, I'm going to do something I don't think I've ever done, and that is feature the same city 2 months in a row for that cover story. Last month, Eric, as you know, Oakland was the cover story there, and the tremendous story of the rebirth of Oakland Park, which has been so great for our entire tourism sector here in Arkansas. But I thought I need to go, there's so much going on downtown too. I need to do a whole cover story. It's too much to get in a column. And so my cover story and my column will be devoted to Hot Springs again this coming Sunday in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. So to save you some time on Sunday morning, I'm going to read you, if you don't mind, I'm going to read you that cover story, and then I'll read you part of the column and how it starts on downtown Hot Springs, because there are things going on that, again, I think the whole state of Arkansas needs to realize. So here we go. The 10th anniversary of the fire that destroyed much of the Majestic Hotel came and went earlier this year without much notice in Hot Springs, but that inferno was the catalyst for a downtown revitalization effort that appears to be picking up steam. On the night of February 27, 2014, the yellow brick portion of the abandoned Majestic was destroyed by the fire. The remainder of the hotel was later condemned by the city. Arkansas historian Nancy Hendricks once described the Majestic as, quote, one of the most famous hotels in the South. For more than a century, the 5-acre complex anchored the intersection of 2 main thoroughfares, Park Avenue and Central Avenue, north of Bathhouse Road, close quote. Originally known as the Avenue Hotel, the Majestic was built in 1882 on the site of early settler Hiram Whittington's house. The avenue attracted wealthy visitors from across the country and even offered streetcar service to and from the bathhouses every 5 minutes. In 1888, the avenue was renamed the Majestic Hotel after the Majestic Stove Company of St. Louis. Quote, as Hot Springs grew, so did the Majestic, Hendricks writes. In 1892, the Majestic was remodeled to include modern conveniences such as elevators, along with the addition that came to be known as the Yellow Brick Building. By the turn of the century, the Majestic was known as a luxurious lodging, popular with tourists as well as athletes who came for baseball spring training. In 1896, it obtained an agreement with the federal government for thermal water from Hot Springs National Reservation to offer in-room therapeutic baths. When the Little Rock Hot Springs and Western Railroad began running in 1899, the number of visitors increased dramatically. The original hotel was raised in 1902, and a 4-story brick building with 150 rooms was constructed. Included in this addition was the hotel's landmark restaurant, the Dutch Treat, which had an eye-catching windmill over the front door, close quote. In 1929, Southwest Hotels, Inc., owned by native Arkansan H. Grady Manning, bought the Majestic. The family owned the hotel until it closed in 2006. Renovation plans later were announced by a nonprofit organization, but never occurred. In May 2014, the Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas put all of downtown Hot Springs on its list of the state's most endangered places. How embarrassing was that? I had the editorial comment. That's not in the story. Let's say. Back to the story. For almost half a century, since 1967, when new Governor Winthrop Rockefeller began serious efforts to stamp out illegal gambling, downtown had been in decline. Growth in Hot Springs tended to be down Highway 7 south toward Lake Hamilton. After the fire, it was as if the Spa City business and civic leaders suddenly realized they were on the verge of losing what made Hot Springs special, much like the people of New Orleans realized what made their city unique after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Government never moves quickly, mind you. The ruins of the hotel stayed at the north end of Central Avenue for more than 2 years before being demolished in late 2016. In June 2021, the Hot Springs Board of Directors voted to sell the property to R.A. Wilson Enterprises, which planned to develop an outdoor music venue. In July 2022, the company backed out of the project. The empty lot is still being marketed to potential developers by local economic development officials. Elsewhere downtown, however, there's plenty of activity. The third and current version of the Arlington, which you'll be hearing about next month, has been undergoing millions of dollars in renovations in advance of its 100th anniversary of opening, which falls on November 28th. The Arlington, perhaps the most iconic privately owned structure in the state, was purchased in 2017 by Al Rajabi's Sky Capital Group of San Antonio from Manning family descendants. On the other side of Central Avenue from the Arlington, Parth Patel of Hot Springs continues transforming the Medical Arts Building into an aloft hotel, though progress has been painfully slow. And just behind the Arlington on Fountain Street, developer Joseph France is moving full speed ahead with his renovation of the Park Hotel. The first of 3 buildings housing the Arlington was completed in 1875 by railroad magnate Samuel Fordyce and business partners Samuel Stitt and William Gaines. Now, since I'm going to skip just a little bit of this, since you're going to be diving into the history next week, but I pick up on April 5th, 1923, an employee noticed smoke coming from an electrical panel. Authorities were notified as the fire slowly began to spread. I've always loved this. William Pinkerton, founder of the well-known security service and a guest at the hotel, here's how much William Pinkerton knew what was going on, was so certain that the fire was controlled that he sat on the Arlington veranda and smoked a cigar rather than retrieve his belongings, all of which he lost to the fire. Ground for a new building was broken October 25th, 1923. George Mann, the primary architect of the state capitol in Little Rock, designed the current structure, and it opened at a good time since Hot Springs was booming in the 1920s. U.S. Senator Joe T. Robinson from Arkansas announced his acceptance of the Democratic nomination for vice president in 1928 on the front steps of the Arlington and used the hotel as a campaign headquarters. His announcement was aired by KTHS AM, which broadcast from the Arlington. The radio tower was mounted on the roof between the two hotel towers. Al Capone regularly booked the entire fourth floor for himself and associates. Babe Ruth began coming to the city with the Boston Red Sox and visited often in later years. Will Rogers, Kate Smith, George Raft also were among the visitors. Just north on Central Avenue, things were just as busy at the Majestic in those days. Quote, in the prosperity of the 1920s, a greater number of average Americans could visit, Hendricks writes. In addition, baseball teams, such as the Pittsburgh Pirates and Boston Red Sox, stayed at the hotel for spring training. Part of their training included hiking from the hotel to their ball field. The thermal baths also appealed to 1920s underworld figures who didn't have to leave the hotel for their spa therapy. The year 1926 saw the addition of an 8-story annex, a red brick building to the west of the yellow brick building. That building later housed the Grady Manning dining room. In the 1940s, the U.S. Army used the Majestic to house World War II soldiers. On December 15, 1945, the hotel reopened to civilians and attracted celebrities such as Alan Ladd, comedian Phyllis Diller, and orchestra leader Guy Lombardo, close quote. The Arlington Park also were among the hotels taken over by the government during World War II. Air conditioning was added to the major hotels of the 1950s. When Brewer August Anheuser-Busch Jr. was married at the Majestic, one of several marriages, by the way, for Mr. Bush, the Budweiser Clydesdales were stabled in the Majestic's garage across the street. Down on Fountain Street, the Park Hotel opened in 1930. Its ad stated, no conventions, no parties, not a commercial hotel, catering to a discriminating clientele who will appreciate its quite refined atmosphere. While a member of the U.S. Senate, Harry Truman liked to stay in room 401 at the park. In 1937, Harry, who was quite tight, by the way, wrote to his wife, Bess, quote, have a beautiful room at the Park Hotel for $3 a day, tub and shower, a big fan, and everything but a radio. And I can live without that, I guess. It would cost me at least $4.50 a day for the same thing at the Arlington, and I believe it's cooler here than the Arlington. Old Harry was tight, but he liked the park. The 7-story Park Hotel was designed by the Little Rock architectural firm Thompson, Sanders, and Giuncio. The hotel was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1982. Hendricks writes, quote, it was built during a period of tourism-driven prosperity in Hot Springs, reflecting a popular architectural style of the 1920s. The park incorporates Mission and Spanish revival influences. The architects led one of the most popular architectural firms in Arkansas in the early 1900s, producing more than 2,000 buildings statewide. The hotel closed in 2020. France is a Little Rock native who lived in Memphis for 15 years and began rehabilitating homes in the hip, artsy Cooper Young neighborhood. Quote, and he gave me this quote when Ron Fuller and I visited a few weeks ago. Ron, thank you for coming down with me. That's when I got interested in historic preservation. He tells me as we tour the park. My uncle would bring me to the Arlington every year when I was growing up. I always loved Hot Springs. I bought the park in September 2023 and hope to have it open for business by the fall of 2025, close quote. France already has replaced 223 windows. He plans to have suites on the 7th floor, along with a rooftop bar and meeting room that can host weddings and other events. A dedicated elevator will take visitors directly to the lobby. From the lobby to the roof, the ornate lobby will feature an upscale Italian restaurant, a bar, and a coffee shop. Quote, we considered doing condos, but settled on a boutique hotel that will have 86 to 88 rooms, says France, who has also worked in the investment banking industry. Back on Central Avenue, the Medical Arts Buildings differs from the Arlington and Park due to the fact that it wasn't built as a hotel. The 16-story structure, which was the tallest building in Arkansas from its completion in 1930 until 1960, when the Tower Building opened in downtown Little Rock, was constructed to house doctors' offices. The Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas placed medical arts on its list of the state's most endangered places in 2012. Medical Arts was built by general contractor G.C. Gordon Walker, with work beginning on December the 1st, 1929. Investors from Little Rock and New Orleans purchased a site that had been occupied by the Rector Bathhouse, owned by the Rector Estate of St. Louis. The Rector family had obtained the property from the federal government in 1893. Medical Arts was designed by the Little Rock architectural firm Allman and Stuck, which also helped design Little Rock Central High School. Medical Arts long has been recognized as being among the top Art Deco skyscrapers in the South. A September 1930 article in the Sentinel Record declared, quote, the structure as it stands is one of the most imposing buildings in Arkansas and a valuable addition to the business district of Hot Springs, close quote. The brick and reinforced concrete structure cost $375,000 to build, a fortune in those days. Tall ceilings and large windows were designed to keep the building cool in the summer. Corridors featured terrazzo floors and Arkansas marble wainscot. 2 brass-trimmed elevators were run by uniformed operators. A 1932 Arkansas Gazette story noted that the elevators were even equipped with telephones that could be used when the elevators were in motion. Unheard of in those days. The building was advertised as the skyscraper of health and eventually hosts 55 doctors and 5 commercial buildings. When the building opened, the first floor was home to a florist and Martin Isley's Medical Arts drugstore. The drugstore had been established by the Isley family in 1875, the city's oldest. Isley renamed it Colonial Drugstore and later moved to another location. The 5th floor had a laboratory. Lower floors generally housed 6 medical offices each. There were fewer offices on the upper floor because, as you know, the building narrows as it goes up. The 15th floor housed a medical library and Dr. Earl McWhirter's dental offices from 1946 to 1968. Medical Arts was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1978, 3 years after it was purchased by Styro Products, Inc. of St. Louis. By the 1980s, the building was mostly vacant. Dr. George Fodio, who began his medical practice in the building in 1945, was the last physician to leave in 1991. Patel's Vipa Hospitality announced in May 2021 that it had purchased the structure. So with things going on at the Arlington, things going on at the park, things going on at Medical Arts, with the 10th anniversary having passed just recently of the Majestic Fire, I thought Arkansans needed an overview of things coming to life downtown again. So that'll be the cover story there. Now, the column is about the School of
arts and mathematics and sciences, sciences, and the arts now. And I'm just going to read you the first part of it because it's got a little of the St. Joseph history in there, especially since that building is soon going to come down, as you know. And then I will finish up. If there are any questions or comments, I would be glad to entertain them. So here's how the column, which will be over on the editorial page Sunday, starts. It was 1990, and Arkansas's First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton, had an idea. Ron Hart, a brilliant scientist at the National Center for Toxicological Research near Pine Bluff, had told the First Lady about residential high schools, such as the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics. Quote, the First Lady recommended it to her husband, Governor Bill Clinton, as a way of helping the state meet a national education goal of having the United States produce the best math and science students in the world by the year 2000, according to the Central Arkansas Library System's Encyclopedia of Arkansas. Quote, the Arkansas School for Mathematics and Sciences was founded in 1991 by an act of the legislature. The school opened in 1993 following a lengthy site selection process, which some of you in the room were involved in. ASMS officially became the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts in 2004 after the legislature passed an act mandating that the school would add an arts program. The act also moved the school into the University of Arkansas system it had been under the direction of the Arkansas Department of Education, close quote. The charter class enrolled as juniors in the fall of 1993 and graduated in the spring of 1995. The selection process led to the school being in downtown Hot Springs at what had been St. Joseph's Infirmary, what's now CHI St. Vincent Hot Springs, began in a former hotel in 1888 as Hot Springs was just taking off as a nationally known health resort. Father Patrick McGowan, a Catholic priest who settled in Hot Springs after the Civil War, donated land in 1880 for a Catholic school. 8 years later, he asked Dr. J.M. Keller to find a building suitable for a Catholic hospital. It turned out that the Adams Hotel on Cedar Terrace had been built as a potential hospital. So Father McGowan purchased the building and then donated it to the Sisters of Mercy. The Guardian, the state's Catholic newspaper, said at the time that the structure was, quote, on a prominent elevation, large and commodious, attractive in architecture that at once catches the eye and holds the attention of the stranger, close quote. Mother Mary Aloysius Fitzpatrick, I love that name, and Sister Mary Claire Quinlan of St. Mary's Convent in Little Rock were sent to Hot Springs to operate the hospital. It opened September 24th, 1888, and the first patient was an engineer admitted by Dr. Charles Drake. 2 additional sisters were sent from Little Rock. A 5th sister was sent near the end of the hospital's 5th year of operation. McGowan died in November 1889 at the hospital he had founded. In 1903, as Hot Springs continued to grow, a 5-story annex of brick and stone was built next to the original building. The hospital, which was equipped to give the city's famous mineral baths, already was earning a national reputation. According to a April 1930 article in the Herald of Watertown, New York, of all places, quote, St. Joseph's Infirmary is a combination of a first-class hotel and hospital, a place for the person seeking rest, recreation, or health. The service is that which one is accustomed to in a first-class hotel. And yet there is on the top floor a modern operating room, which must be a delight to physicians, close quote. In 1927, the Sisters of Mercy opened a building that was touted as the most expensive hospital ever constructed in Arkansas to that point. It was used as a hospital until 1991, when a new facility was built several miles to the south, and I go on then to talk about the Math, Science, and Art School from there. So anyway, that's a taste of what people around Arkansas are going to get. A lot of Hot Springs history on Sunday, whether they want it or not. Great thing about a newspaper, right? It's like a cafeteria. You can pick or choose, but they're going to get a big dose because, again, I'm pretty bullish on the future. Now, the thing I always warn is, let's not get complacent about the progress that has already been made. Let's realize that the biggest building, the Army Navy Hospital, is empty, deteriorating, towering over this entire city, a massive issue that must be dealt with. And then let's go down Central Avenue and look at buildings that are still empty. Dugan Stewart, DeSoto Howe Hotel, the old Downtowner, the old Velva Rose, all large buildings, and their emptiness is not very attractive to tourists. But I think with the work going on, like I said, I tend to be a glass half full person. And the glass half full person tells me that capital investments tend to attract other capital investments. Not only do we have the work going on downtown, we have what I wrote about last month's cover story, the tens, hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent in Oakland in recent years to give us our state's nicest hotel, a spa that recently received a Forbes 4-star rating, only 220 in the world that have received that rating, and one of them is right here in Hot Springs. So we are bringing a new class of visitors to Hot Springs. I think that can be built up. The other thing that makes me optimistic is demographic based, and that is the continued incredible growth of the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. As you know, Hot Springs was once the place to get on the train and come down from Chicago and St. Louis. That's the people that attracted. I mentioned as a boy, Hot Springs being my New York City. And so the Arlington was my Waldorf. Medical Arts was my Empire State Building, if you looked across. The Central Record was my New York Times, I guess. And I mean, Hot Springs, even when I was a boy, I was weird. I was a newspaper collector. Even had you old timers remember the New Era, an afternoon newspaper. In fact, there was a great newsstand across from my father's store in downtown Arkadelphia. And I love the fact that during the race meet, and you old timers will remember this, the New Era would put out what it called the Green Sheet Edition, and that is they would wait to go to press until the first 2 races were completed so you could see if your Daily Double hit or not that afternoon newspaper. And those would come by bus to Arkadelphia. People would go in there. I've got sons now who can't conceive of a pre-internet era. They said, what? They buy a newspaper just to see what the first 2 races were? I said, yeah, that was big time at the time. So again, all of this was important to me, and I could go into the lobby still. I can remember very clearly with that Chicago connection and buy in the Arlington lobby a same-day copy of the Chicago Tribune that would be flown in. And I loved to buy the Tribune every time I was here. So again, it was my New York City. That wasn't all downtown, of course. I also have very fond memories of, by golly, Hot Springs, that big city, had a Kmart before we had ever heard of any kind of discount store in Arkadelphia. It had a Burger Chef out there before we had ever heard of a chain restaurant in Arkadelphia, where I hailed from. So it was New York City. But as the Chicago influence kind of drained away, I think much of the future is that DFW metropolitan area, because it continues to grow, and we are less than 5-hour drive from that metro area. In fact, most demographers now think that DFW may pass Chicago by the end of this decade as the third largest metro area in the United States, behind only New York and Los Angeles. So with new capital investment and where we are located, I think a new golden era could begin sooner than many of us think. Because once those Texans discover we have real rivers, not creeks that we call rivers. We have real trees, not mesquite bushes that we call trees. Once they discover that, the beauty of Arkansas, the friendliness of its people, and all Hot Springs has to offer, I think the new golden era is on the way. But again, the message, don't be complacent. Army-Navy Hospital, the other large buildings downtown that are empty, big issues that still must be dealt with in the months and the years ahead. With that, I'll hush and I'll leave a few minutes for questions. And I didn't want to go after 1 o'clock. I've done so many Rotary clubs through the years. I call that the old Rotary rule. Years ago, when I was a young sports writer, Eric knew me when I was a young sports writer, but I was invited out of town. It was down in far south Arkansas, I remember, to speak to a civic club. This is a true story. I was so excited. They're inviting me. I was a young Arkansas Democrat sports writer. So I go down there, and an elderly gentleman had invited me, very nice man, but I come in there and I've got all my notes ready, and I say, how long do you want me to speak? And I'll never forget, he said, you can speak as long as you want to, but we'll all be gone at 1 o'clock. So, that's what I'm afraid of here. So I'll get the questions or comments.
What, if anything, have you heard about Army-Navy? Because the government is not ours.
Yeah, I'm not hearing a lot, although I know there are probably people in this room that can tell you a lot more than I can that is being worked on. From my standpoint, the most simple solution right now, as the state, has given up its lease, it falls back to the Department of Defense, the old War Department, that first opened it, and Defense doesn't want it for anything. They don't need old aging buildings for any kind of new veterans hospital, so they don't want it. To me, the most simple thing right now would be, and I know I simplify things, but that's what columnists have to do. We've only got so much space, so we have to take complex things and make them simple. But I think since it's already surrounded by the national park, is to let the Park Service take it over and at least keep it safe and in the dry until we could find those who might want to lease it, just as we did the bathhouses for many years. We kept them dry, we kept them safe, and now we have leased all but one of the bathhouses. Now, I know the Park Service is going to say we don't have enough money, but the Great American Outdoors Act that passed just a couple of years ago, put enormous new resources into the Park Service. Then you can decide what you want to do. And I think we ought to at least think big. I threw out once an idea of why can't we get something like a branch of the Savannah College of Art and Design, being the art center that Hot Springs is, to serve the population base in this part of the county, such as that Dallas-Fort Worth area. But that just is an example of thinking big. But we've got to keep it safe while we think big, and got to keep another fire from breaking out. Yes, Doc Crawford.
Doc Crawford from Arkansas and Hot Springs. Your ending was a beautiful poem, by the way. My question has to do with the Majestic. You're quite a historian of the Majestic, obviously. Did you ever know George Gray?
I
Just curious.
I did not. Yeah.
Okay, George Gray taught Bill Clinton how to play the trombone.
Okay.
I taught George Gray later on at Henderson, and he got a degree in literature. I was chairman of the department a long time there. But the interesting thing about George Gray is he had a music store here for many years. And I used to go to the Majestic Bar and hear him on his last gigs, the last 3 or 4 years of his gigging. Then he closed his store, and I think he was without a spouse then. He showed up at Henderson one fall for registration. Now, I didn't know him from Adam except his playing, you know. I didn't know anything much about him. And then he told me who he was, and I said, well, my goodness, what are you doing here? You are a musician, you know. He was band director at one of the junior highs until the new president, who later became the first president of the National Park College. I think he's dead now. But he wouldn't let George be the band director anymore because he wasn't certified, didn't have a degree. Anyway, I said, well, you want to do something in literature? Oh yeah, I've been wanting, that's my dream. I play all kinds of instruments. Anyway, George graduated eventually with honors, but just if there are any young people here, he went to the University of Tennessee, one semester, hated it, walked off. You don't do that.
Yeah.
You sign in, but you got to sign out. He had 5 Fs waiting for him when he came to Henderson from way back when he was 18 years old. You know, he went to the University of Tennessee personally and tried to get those changed. I said, George, you can't do that. He said, I found that out. I was unsuccessful, you know. But anyway, he finally got a degree with honors.
Thanks for being here, Dr. Crawford. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just recently moved back to Hot Springs. I graduated from Lake Hamilton in 1971.
Gotcha.
I've been a professional musician and music teacher, orchestra conductor. I traveled the whole western United States. George Gray was my teacher. And when he came to Lake Hamilton, he knew I was hungry for music, and he taught me all the instruments. When I went to Southern State in Magnolia, I got a scholarship for French horn and trumpet. I played the flute. Of course, now I play the fiddle and all the instruments.
So you're a fiddle playing mule rider then?
So I don't want to take away from the rest of your wonderful talk, but I'm trying to get back into the history here.
Yeah. Oh, Hot Springs history, I can never get enough of it. You mentioned the Majestic, you know, in its declining years. I actually, I'm a lover of old hotels, and as I've told you, a lover of Hot Springs. When my boys were very young, I actually got a room, spent 2 4th of Julys at the Majestic, because I would love to get in the new edition a room with a balcony that looked straight down Central Avenue, and I knew which room to get. They still had that big pool and a great pool, and would do hot dogs and hamburgers out there. So I actually spent 2 4th of Julys staying in the Majestic. For that site, I know there's a lot of talk, and the thing to me that still makes the most sense is a mixed-use development of some kind, retail, restaurants on the first floor, maybe 1 or 2 floors of boutique Hot Springs, of hotel rooms. I don't think personally, and some of you may correct me, I don't think Hot Springs downtown needs a lot more hotel rooms. It needs nicer hotel rooms is what it needs. So we need to upgrade a lot of those that we have, which we're seeing going on at the park right now. So maybe a couple, and then condos. Condos or apartments above that for ones that would like a place downtown. But I think as things continue to build, as you get more restaurants, as you get more upscale shopping, you've already got several spas downtown, and you start attracting that Dallas-Fort Worth crowd, there's a certain part of that urban crowd, I think, who would prefer to have a condo in a downtown urban type atmosphere than they had out on the lake.
Yeah.
And so then maybe that leads to something to do with the downtown, or the Belle de Rose as downtown residential takes off at that point. Yes, sir.
What's your take on Arkansas family and horse winning the Kentucky Derby?
Oh, I thought it was just wonderful. I'm dating myself. The main owner of that horse, Lance Gasaway, I covered him when he was a UAM boll weevil in the 1980s as a sports writer. And I knew the national press would love the boll weevil angle. I noticed they used it again this past Saturday after they interviewed him, and Mike Tirico was laughing. But, you know, the thing about it is, as I explain to people, Eric, I'm not making your pitch for you here, but what I always like to point out to people is that, think about it, we live in a state with no NFL team. We have no Major League Baseball team. We have no NBA team. We have no NHL team. And we don't have the population base to have any of those ever. So we're only in the big leagues in one sport, and that's thoroughbred racing. And as the purses go up year after year, the number of stakes races goes up year after year, we get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, you know, Arkansas owned horses spent the winter at Oaklawn winning Triple Crown races. That's going to become even more common, I can assure you, in the years ahead. So it's great to be in the major leagues here. Yes.
In the years after the Majestic burned, we had several professional survey studies come in to ask what the residents of Hot Springs thought would be a top use for the Majestic site. And the various studies seem to all emphasize thermal bathing in that area. It came out number one in my recollection in several different studies. And as time has gone on, that has just disappeared from the planning process. So you mentioned some of the ideas that you have about the development of that. What do you personally think about the concept of developing outdoor bathing facilities in that area and making that commercially viable?
Again, who would do it? I don't know that you could. I don't know that you could do enough to make it really commercially viable. So then, does the city do it at that point? Does the county do it at that point? Does the Park Service agree to pump that much water to that site? Those are all things I just don't know the answer to. So that's a long way of saying I don't know. One more, I tend to get off topic, but this is one of my favorite quotes. Back when I was editor in 1991 of Arkansas Business, I was spending the day with some great Arkansas business leaders, and one of the ones was Mr. Charles Murphy of Murphy Oil in El Dorado. And you remember pictures of Mr. Murphy, you know, dapper little man, always wore a bow tie. Had just a great day with him. And at the end of the day, I asked one of those kind of silly, I call it Barbara Walters, if you were a tree type questions. And, you know, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Barbara, but I asked Mr. Murphy, I said, if you could give one piece of advice to a young business person coming up, just one, what would that be? And he said, I think at least once every day you ought to look somebody else straight in the eye and say, I don't know. And I've always thought that was just such a wonderful piece of advice. Just think of how many of us try to go through life, you know, pretending we know the answer to things, rather than saying I don't know. So, anything else? Because we are about to hit one, right?
Rex, you may not have all the answers, but I want you to know that Hot Springs is extremely fortunate and blessed to have you as one of our champions. So
I appreciate you saying that. I told you I'd never done two covers in a row on the same city, but I figure since my publisher boss Walter Huntsman has such investments here that I could get away with that just fine. So going to be a lot of Hot Springs in Sunday's paper, and thank you for letting me come and give you a sneak preview of what we've got coming. Great to be here, and I'd be happy to visit with any of you.
Thank you so much, Rex. That was fabulous. And Paul, we want to thank you, the library, for having us here every month. Y'all have a great summer. Thank you.
Thank you for that.